Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome our special guest, fellow Michigander, Jeff Daniels. Thanks so much for making the time to do this.
Thanks, Paul.
Who is the real Jeff Daniels?
I have no idea. That would take probably a team of psychiatrists to figure out. I mean, if you look at the acting career, it's certifiably schizophrenic. It really is, because you can go from Dumb and Dumber to Gettysburg or Squid and the Whale. There's a lot of people in between those two or three people. So probably the music is probably the closest. But even in the music, I go wildly comic to very serious. So I'm probably still in search of whoever that is.
Can you remember and tell us some of your earliest musical influences?
I remember getting Tumbleweed Connection, the Elton John album, and I didn't even know who Elton was. And the album jacket, the cover, intrigued me at a young age, and I bought it, and I just loved it, and I didn't know why I loved it. I'd never heard anything like it, and I think a lot of it was Bernie. Elton's playing, but Bernie Taupin, the writing. As I look back, I start to look at the writers. I started to look at the storytellers, and then that led to guys like Arlo Guthrie, who could tell a story and then weave a song into that story. Stevie Goodman, I saw Stevie Goodman at the Bottom Line in New York, amazed at what that guy did with just himself and a guitar. Christine Lavin, lately guys like Todd Snyder. Todd's got such a point of view. Only Todd can write those songs, and they're almost like you can't cover them. And that's what you look for in writing, guys that have a singular point of view.
When I was listening to the albums that I got of yours, I thought this guy sounds like Steve Goodman and Arlo Guthrie. That was what I thought. My heroes,
my early heroes, they opened the door for, you can just have a guitar and you can write funny and you can write serious back to back. And Christine Lavin was another one. I chased all those three people. They kind of led the way for me.
Could you pick a favorite artist that influenced you?
No, probably not, because I'm still probably trying to define what it is I do, and it's influenced by a lot of people. Then you get guys like Stefan Grossman, who I've been privileged to have lessons from, and have also studied him since the 80s, his tab books on finger picking and the whole deal. Then you get into the blues. You get guys like Lonnie Johnson, Skip James, Robert Johnson, all those guys, and what were they singing about? What were they doing? Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee. I remember listening to them in the 80s. A friend turned me on to them. They're all probably in there somewhere. Lyle Lovett is a guy that, again, as a writer, only Lyle could write that song that way. If I had to pick somebody present day, it'd probably be Lyle.
Can you remember the first song you wrote?
Yeah, it's in my notebook. My big, huge notebook of everything I've ever written. Yeah, I think it was about my dog, my first dog, and it's god-awful. It'll never see the light of day.
You do this tour. You have 4 albums to your credit thus far. So you've recorded, you've written songs, you've performed. Could you pick a favorite part of music?
I think the moment, and it happens with some of the older songs now that I've played a few hundred times, but it's certainly that moment when you get on top of that new song, and it takes a bunch of performances in front of people to kind of give birth to it. But you get on top of it, you get the phrasing right, you get the guitar right, and then it connects, and you see and hear from an audience that this thing that really was just an idea in your head weeks or months ago is now something that you will be playing on a regular basis, and because it connects with people you don't even know. It's that moment where that first connection happens to that new thing. That's pretty cool.
In the liner notes to one of your albums, you talk about how these songs are like a snapshot, and you've been keeping, like in this notebook, like a journal. You take it a step further and you record these songs and perform them for people. What would you say makes you want to do that?
I'm living a very creative life, but it's creative on my terms. And this country, I wouldn't say it's exemplary in the way it treats its artists or supports its artists. I could argue that Europe does a better job of that or takes it more seriously. I think America's always been like that. There is certainly room for artists and art, but you kind of have to make your own space. If it's what you're supposed to do, which is what I was told at the age of 21. I had a director from New York see me in a college production, and he took me aside and he literally asked me, "You know what you should do with your life, don't you?" And he said, "Come to New York and join my theater company and chase an acting career. No promises, but you're good enough to give it a shot." And that acting chase led to a lot of sitting around waiting for the phone to ring for someone else to tell me it was time to be creative. The guitar, which I picked up in 1976, became that go-to creative outlet, so I could keep that side of my life and that part of my brain and that part of me, which is probably the essential part, going 24/7. And I didn't have to wait for the phone to ring. I didn't have to wait for somebody in Hollywood to tell me that I'm hot and I can now be in a movie. I just was able to do it on my own. The music has probably, fulfilled me the most of all.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to an interview with singer-songwriter and actor Jeff Daniels, Grandfather's Hat. Tell us about that tune.
That's a song. I wear a fedora. I really like those fedoras. They're kind of timeless. And my kids played hockey, and high school hockey in Michigan, and I was wearing it to one of the games, and a friend of mine came up to me, and he knew my family, knew my grandfather, and he came up to me and goes, "Is that your grandfather's hat?" And I said, No, it's just one that was very similar to and before I got to the end of the sentence, I knew it was a song. Not just a song about my particular grandfather, but your mother's necklace, or your aunt's ring, or your father's knife. Guy Clark has a great song about his dad's jackknife, and so it's that kind of missing someone who is no longer here.
What would you like to play it for all the listeners out there?
Sure.
All right.
I don't know, I don't care, long as I can wear you anywhere. You dress me up and you dress me down. You say a lot without making a sound. Some people, they just laugh at me, wondering who I think I'm trying to be. But if everything they say is true, I guess I'm just a lot like you. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I recall. Sometimes no matter how I try, it don't matter at all. This time all it took was for someone to say, "Is that your grandfather's hat?" You stood out in the crowd, you were one of a kind, the life of the party, never behind. You took it all in with a grain of salt. You took the blame when it wasn't your fault. I swear I can see you, plain as day. I close my eyes and I can hear you say, "I'm damned if I do, and I'm damned if I don't. The hell I will and the hell I won't." Sometimes I remember, sometimes I recall. Sometimes no matter how I try, it don't matter at all. This time all it took was for someone to say, "Is that your grandfather's hat?" I go walking down your old street, I tip your hat to all I meet. You dress me up and you dress me down, you still say a lot without making a sound. Some people, they still laugh at me, wondering who I think I'm trying to be. But if everything they say is true, I guess I'm just a lot like you. 'Cause I stand out in the crowd, I am one of a kind, I'm the life of the party and I'm never behind. I take it all in with a grain of salt, and I take the blame when it ain't my fault. I'm damned if I do, I'm damned if I don't, and the hell I will and the hell I won't. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I recall. Sometimes no matter how I try, it don't matter at all. This time all it took was for someone to say is that your grandfather's hat.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Daniels. Thanks so much. One of the things about music is you get to meet a lot of people. One of the tracks that you do, you did a cover of the George Harrison song, Here Comes the Sun. Tell us about some of the exciting people you've met through your music. I mean, George Harrison, first of all, say no more. But
Yeah, that was pretty cool. The short version of the story is I was doing a movie called Checking Out, 1988, and it was produced by George Harrison's independent film company called Handmade Films. And we were hoping he'd show up on the set in L.A., and sure enough, one day he did. And I had a guitar in the dressing room, and I said, would you mind signing my guitar? And he said, I'd be happy to. Took him into a back room so it wouldn't be like 100,000 signatures. And he signed the guitar, and then before he gave it back to me, he flipped it over, and on that guitar played Here Comes the Sun. I mean, just me and two other guys, the three of us sitting there. It was like our own little private concert. It was such a gift that he gave. And he couldn't have been nicer. He couldn't have been more interested in anyone other than himself. It was just a great lesson in how to handle that level of fame or any kind of fame.
you have a theater up in Michigan, and everyone can check out jeffdaniels.com. The proceeds from the sale of the CDs goes towards this theater, the Purple Rose of Cairo. We just reviewed that film. It was from 1985, but we did like a flashback kind of thing. So tell us about the theater a bit.
Purple Rose Theater Company is 20 years old this season. Its mission is mainly to do new American plays, particularly plays about that part of the country. That's how I was brought up in New York at the Circle Repertory Company. Every play was a new play. Every play, the months before, the playwright was walking around rewriting his second act, getting ready for rehearsal. There was a thrill to that versus doing what New York had done last year and deemed popular, or doing, Shakespeare, the old classics and all, which are fine, and many, many theaters do those. I want new stuff. I want living, breathing playwrights writing about the people sitting in our seats. Write about them. Connect with them. And then I'm interested. After 20 years, that's what we're able to do now, more often than not. I'm real proud of that place, and the fact that that part of the country supports it means the world to me.
What made you call the theater the Purple Rose of Cairo? That movie's great. I got to interview Woody.
I was a young actor. I was 30 at the time. I'd been in New York about 9 years. Terms of Endearment had come out. And I got that movie 10 days after Terms of Endearment had been released. So Terms was now the number one movie in the country, which at the time, for a character-driven film like Terms, it bypassed Raiders of the Lost Ark and all those kind of, at the time, special effects movies. you hadn't seen a character-driven comedy drama in a long time like that. And there we were, number one, due in no part to Jack, Shirley, and Deborah. Jim Brooks had a hit, and I happened to be in it. 10 days later, they were looking to recast Purple Rose of Cairo, and they called me in, and screen test later, and meeting with the studio, I got it. So now I'm working with Woody Allen, and I get handed the script, and it's not a supporting role, or it's not one starring role. It's 2 starring roles in a Woody Allen movie. And I'm going, okay, everything I've ever learned, please, God, let me remember now. And that's how I went into work every day. And about halfway through the movie, Woody said I was good. For a young actor who had been battling, rejection and are you going to make it? What's it, is this really worth it? It's 9 years. Terms of endearment, yeah, but is it 2 or 3 movies and done? You just don't know. The business is so here today, gone tomorrow. And Woody said I was good. And so I remember going home and saying to my wife, I think I'm going to be able to make a living in this business. And it wasn't, I'm going to be a star. It wasn't, I'm a genius. It was, if Woody Allen thinks I'm good, I think I'm going to be able to make a living in this business, because if I'm good enough for Woody, I'm good enough for anybody. And that was a turning point. So years later, when it was time to name the theater, so we named it the Purple Rose Theater Company.
My 2 final questions. What is the best part about being Jeff Daniels?
So many people go through life having to do things they don't want to do, or they have a job that they wish they'd never taken, but there's security in it. And I think the satisfaction that I've had of going way back to that director, Marshall W. Mason from Circle Rep, when he said, you know what you should do with your life, don't you? What he didn't say, it's going to be hard. You're the only one who believes in you, and you're going to have to find people along the way. The fact that decades later I pulled that off, and that now I'm still living a creative life and doing what I want to do, and that people in the business, whether it's Broadway or film, TV, or music, want whatever it is I do, that's the best part, is that I'm still relevant.
My last question, what would you like to say in closing to all the people who are listening?
What I told my kids. I tell my kids, fall in love with tomorrow. Don't worry about today. Don't worry about the past. Fall in love tomorrow. What are you doing tomorrow? That's the creative process. That's a creative life right there, is working on that next thing. Yeah, fall in love with tomorrow.
Well, Mr. Daniels, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.